Welcome to this deep dive. When you think about your organization's digital infrastructure, picture it like the human body's circulatory system, vital data flowing everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
A blockage or weakness there can be catastrophic.
Absolutely. It's a really good analogy.
So today, we're diving into a really crucial aspect of keeping that flow healthy and protected: network security.
That's spot on, and it highlights just how critical this stuff is. We're drawing from Episode 4 of the Cybersecurity Threat Landscape, which focuses on the specific tools and strategies we use to defend our digital assets, right? Out at the network level.
Right.
Our goal today really is to give you a clear picture of these essential components and, maybe more importantly, why they're just absolutely vital.
Okay, so let's get into it. First up, what I always think of as the bouncers at the digital club,
Okay.
firewalls.
Yeah, the gatekeepers.
Exactly. These are all about controlling who gets in and out of your network based on rules you set. Think of them as security checkpoints, scrutinizing every attempt to connect.
And only allowing legitimate traffic through. Yeah. And what's interesting is how these digital bouncers have evolved over time.
How so?
Well, the earliest ones, packet filtering firewalls, they were like really quick visual checks. They looked at individual data packets in isolation.
Okay. Fast, I guess.
Super fast and efficient, yeah. But because they only looked at isolated bits of info, they could be tricked. More sophisticated attacks could, spread malicious code across multiple packets.
Sneaking it in piece by piece.
Exactly. Trying to sneak contraband past security bit by bit.
Right. Okay. So then we have stateful inspection firewalls. These are what? The bouncers who remember your face from earlier?
That's a good way to put it. They keep track of the entire conversation, the whole state of the connection, from the initial handshake right through to the closing remarks.
So they have more context.
So much more context. This gives them a much better understanding of whether the traffic is legitimate or not. The downside: that deeper inspection, it can sometimes take a little more processing power, maybe slow things down slightly.
Makes sense, the trade-off.
Precisely. And then we get to the next generation firewalls, or NGFWs.
Right, the heavy hitters.
These are like the entire security detail at the club entrance. They combine the traditional firewall functions, stateful inspection, packet filtering, with things like intrusion prevention and application control.
Okay, so they're not just checking ID, they're looking at intent.
Exactly. They're not just checking who you are and what you're carrying, but also what you're planning to do inside. So, for example, an NGFW can actually block specific applications known to be risky, like certain peer-to-peer apps or social media platforms, regardless of the port or protocol they're trying to use.
That's much more sophisticated. And it's not just about the kind of bouncer you have, but where you put them. Or we've got perimeter firewalls.
Yeah, absolutely. That's your first line of defense, standing guard right at the very edge of your network, facing the wild west of the internet.
The main gate.
The main gate, exactly. Your primary barrier against external threats. But, as networks have gotten way more complex inside, the idea of internal firewalls has become really important too.
Okay. So walls inside the castle.
Kind of. If we go back to your circulatory system analogy, internal firewalls are like valves inside the system. They control the flow of traffic between different parts of your internal network.
Adding extra layers?
Extra layers of security within the organization itself, which actually brings us neatly to network segmentation.
Yeah, that feels like such a logical next step. It's like the digital equivalent of putting up internal walls within a building, right? The source material uses the analogy of bulkheads on a ship.
That's a perfect analogy. If one section is breached, the water doesn't flood the entire vessel.
Containment.
That's the core benefit, containment. By dividing your network into these isolated segments, you limit the potential damage an attacker can do if they compromise one area.
Like keeping different departments separate.
Exactly. For instance, you might put your highly sensitive financial data on a completely separate network segment from, say, the one used by your R&D team or general office staff.
Makes sense. So if someone clicks a bad link in marketing, it doesn't automatically give access to the finance servers.
Precisely. If an attacker compromises a less secure segment, they wouldn't have that direct, easy path to your most critical information.
Okay, so we've got our external walls, our internal walls, segmentation. But even with all that, it seems smart to assume that some sneaky activity might still try to get through or even start from inside.
That's a realistic assumption, unfortunately. And that's where intrusion detection and prevention systems, the IDS and IPS, come in.
Right, the surveillance systems.
Sort of. These are the systems constantly looking for anything suspicious happening on your network traffic. Think of them as, surveillance cameras and security guards patrolling inside the perimeter.
Okay, and there's a difference between detection and prevention, obviously.
A key difference. What's fascinating is how they operate. An intrusion detection system, an IDS, is basically like a security camera. It watches the network traffic, spots anything that looks out of place based on its rules, and records it.
So it alerts you.
It alerts you. It logs the event, sends an alert so you can investigate later, but crucially, it doesn't actively block anything itself.
Okay, just watching and reporting.
Right. Now, the intrusion prevention system, the IPS, is more proactive. It's like the security guard who sees someone acting suspiciously and actually steps in to stop them.
So it takes action.
It takes action.
Yeah.
When an IPS detects something malicious, based on its configuration, it can actively block the traffic, maybe drop the connection entirely, or alert administrators immediately while taking that blocking action.
Got it. And how do these systems actually spot the bad stuff?
Good question. They generally use two main methods. First is signature-based detection. This is like having a big database of known attack patterns, like fingerprints of bad guys.
Like antivirus signatures.
Exactly like antivirus signatures. It looks for specific sequences or characteristics that match known attacks. Very effective against threats we already know about.
But what about the new stuff? The attacks nobody's seen before, the 0 days. Signatures wouldn't work then.
Correct. That's where the second method, anomaly-based detection, comes in. This is a bit different. It works by first establishing a baseline of what normal network activity looks like for your specific environment.
Learning what's typical.
Right. It learns the patterns, the types of traffic, the times of day things happen. Then it flags anything that significantly deviates from that established baseline.
Like noticing, I don't know, a massive data transfer going out at 3 a.m. when that never usually happens.
Exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anomaly-based detection can be really valuable for catching those novel zero-day exploits because it doesn't rely on knowing the attack beforehand.
But I imagine it could also flag legitimate things sometimes if something unusual but okay happens.
That's the main challenge, yeah. False positives. Because it's looking for deviations from the norm, it can sometimes raise alarms for legitimate but unusual activity. Fine-tuning it is key.
So what's the best approach?
Often it's a combination. Using signature-based for the known threats and anomaly-based to catch the unknowns, and then correlating the alerts from both can be very effective. You get the best of both worlds, ideally.
Okay, right. So now we have firewalls, segmentation, IDS, IPS.
Yeah.
All these things are potentially generating a ton of alerts and logs. How on earth does a security team make sense of all that noise?
That is a huge challenge, and that's where the Security Information and Event Management System, the SIEM, SIEM, comes into play.
Okay, the SIM. The source material compared it to a detective piecing together clues from different crime scenes.
That's a really apt comparison, actually. A SIEM system acts as a central intelligence hub for all your security data. It collects logs and event data from potentially hundreds or thousands of different devices across your network.
From the firewalls, the IDSIPs.
Firewalls, IDS, servers, workstations, applications, databases, you name it. It pulls it all into one place and analyzes it in near real time.
And the real magic is connecting the dots.
That's the real power, yeah.
Yeah.
Its ability to correlate events from these disparate sources. So, for example, a SIEM might see a series of failed login attempts on a critical server, reported by the server's logs.
Okay.
Then, maybe moments later, it sees an alert from the ITS about unusual outbound traffic originating from that same server.
Putting two and two together.
Exactly. Individually, those alerts might seem like minor issues, maybe even get lost in the noise. But when correlated by the SIEM, they paint a much clearer and potentially more alarming picture suggesting a possible successful breach and ongoing malicious activity.
So it's not just telling you that a firewall blocks something here and an IPS flags something there. The SIEM can connect those dots, see the bigger pattern, and say, hey, these two seemingly separate events might actually be part of a single coordinated attack.
Precisely. That correlation is absolutely key. It helps security teams cut through the noise, prioritize the most critical threats, and investigate incidents much more efficiently, rather than drowning in mountains of individual, potentially unrelated alerts.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, putting all these pieces in place, firewalls, segmentation, IDSIPs, mints, Sounds like a pretty significant undertaking for any organization.
Right.
What are some of the main things they need to think about during setup?
Oh, definitely. There are several critical things to consider. First and foremost, obviously, are the organization's specific needs and risk profile.
Right, one size doesn't fit all.
Not at all. A small tech startup has very different security requirements and probably a different budget than a large financial institution or a government agency. So network size and complexity, the type and sensitivity of the data being protected, these are huge factors.
And budget, you mentioned budget. That's always a factor.
Always. Budget plays a crucial role in deciding which specific tools are feasible and how extensively they can be deployed and configured.
And surely it can't just be about buying and plugging in the technology itself, can it? It feels like the people involved, the human element, must be a huge part of this equation.
Absolutely essential. You're spot on. Technology is a vital part of the solution, a necessary foundation, but it's definitely not the only part.
And so what else?
Well, regular security audits and vulnerability assessments are critical. You need to proactively look for weaknesses in your defenses before attackers find them.
Like checking the locks periodically.
Good analogy. And perhaps most critically, ongoing security awareness training for employees is just paramount. People are often the first line of defense or potentially the weakest link.
Phishing emails, weak passwords.
All that stuff. A well-informed, security-conscious workforce can significantly reduce the risk of human error leading to a major security incident. It complements the technology perfectly.
So I guess the big takeaway here is that effective network security isn't like installing software and you're done. It's not a one-time task.
Not even close. It's an ongoing commitment. It requires continuous monitoring, constant vigilance, regular updates to your systems and rules as threats evolve, and, crucially, adapting your security posture as the landscape changes.
You have to keep evolving because the attackers definitely are.
Precisely. It demands that constant vigilance and a really proactive mindset. Set and forget just doesn't work in network security.
Okay. All right. So just to quickly recap then, in this deep dive, we've really unpacked the core elements of network security. We talked about the critical role of firewalls as those gatekeepers.
The different types and where to place them.
Right. The strategic importance of network segmentation for containing breaches, like those ship bulkheads.
Limiting the blast radius.
Yeah. The constant watchfulness and intervention of intrusion detection and prevention systems, the IDS and IPS.
Spotting the known and unknown threats.
And finally, the central analysis and correlation provided by the SIEM systems, bringing all that data together.
Making sense of the noise, yeah.
So, looking ahead, where are we going next?
Well, in our next deep dive, we'll be shifting focus slightly to another vital layer of defense, endpoint security.
Protecting the actual devices.
Exactly. We'll explore how to protect the individual devices like laptops, servers, smartphones, tablets, all the places where data ultimately resides and users interact.
Makes sense. Another critical piece.
Yep.
Okay, finally, as we wrap this up, I want you, our listener, to maybe think about how these different network security layers we've discussed, the firewalls, the segmentation, IDSIP, how they actually work together or should work together in your own environment or an environment you know. And maybe more importantly, what could be the real-world consequences if any one of these areas were compromised or failed? It really highlights just how interconnected and frankly essential a strong layered network security foundation truly is.